I'd say I'm most proud about the fact that I'm just within the rewilding space. I'm a cog in this bigger piece that is protecting nature, protecting wildlife, protecting the environment.
This is All Nature from the Carbon Copy podcast, Episode 1, Heal the Wild. In 2023, the State of Nature Partnership published a concerning report outlining in detail the decline in wildlife and the destruction of natural environments in the UK over the last half-century. Across the UK, the species studied have declined on average by 19% since 1970, and nearly 1 in 6 are threatened with extinction from Great Britain. Nature is in decline globally, but centuries of hunting, industrial-scale farming and fishing, and the expansion of urban areas at a rapid and destructive pace has left the UK one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. With nature and natural processes being vital to human life, breathable air, clean water, the production of food, we need to act fast. I'm Isabel Sparrow, and in this series of the Carbon Copy podcast, we'll be meeting some of the passionate and dedicated people working to restore and renew nature and wildlife in places around the UK. You can find their stories and others on the Carbon Copy website. Check out the show notes for more information. One sunny afternoon in early September, producer Brad and I had the privilege of visiting Heal Somerset, the first site owned and managed by Heal Rewilding. There, we met trustee and co-founder Jan Stannard, the site's ranger Dan Hill, and communications officer Ruby Batt, who helped to organise the visit. After switching to walking boots, we headed out onto the site to see what the project was all about firsthand.
So we are at the heart of Heal's foundation site, called Heal Somerset. Every site will be called Heal, followed by the county it's in. And this is the first of 48 sites we plan to establish, one in every county. So 460 acres of former dairy farm. And we came here in January 2023. Yeah, we're about just over 18 months in. We're walking down into a little valley, which is the route to one of the tributaries of the River Frome that run through the site. We're absolutely blessed having 3 tributaries, all called the River Frome, slightly confusingly. One in we're in the southern fields, which is one of our areas that we have open to the public. Then we have one in the northern field, which is kept for wildlife, so it's not public access. And when we have one at the very east of the site in an area that we're working with the local community on developing, which is more of a nature area. But where we're walking now, it's beautiful, beautiful day, blue sky, is really the sort of heart of the site.
I wanted to know what had led Jan to this project and how this location was chosen.
So from a really young age, I adored creatures, little creatures, bigger creatures. When I was in the brownies, I made a tawny owl out of a sock, which I still have, and just loved everything big and small. It's been a drumbeat through my life and made my heart sing. But after university, I had a business career, and it was only when I got to my early 60s and I thought, in my lifetime, nature has just gone off a cliff. Surely there's something I can do to make a difference when I stop working, which is ironic because I haven't ever worked harder since I came up with the idea of Heal. But the idea of creating an entity slowly came to me over a number of years of researching and thinking. And the fundamental underlying notion is this is only going to be fixed by everyone together. So we all have to contribute. So whether you're an individual with a few pounds or a big company with a lot more resources, that if we all combine forces and can buy land which is protected for nature forever, that would help not just nature but climate, and by giving access to people also help people's well-being. To have got this and seeing it recover already so quickly is a humbling, actually, and an absolute joy for everybody that works for us now. When we launched, we said we wanted to buy our first site by the end of 2022. So we gave ourselves 3 full years. And we had heard this was for sale. So it was owned by a farming family, last properly farmed about 7 years ago. Then it was owned by another family for a while, and then we bought it from them. And then our second site, probably worth saying, is we always said we wanted to be in the north of England so that we would be balanced in how we came at it. So we're looking we will be looking next year in Yorkshire, Northumberland, Lancashire, anyway, up north. And once we've got our second site, we will then be any county. The site in every county is the model we're committed to.
I was interested in the different ways people can visit and interact with the site. I first asked Jan how it works if someone wants to visit, and then I spoke to Dan about engaging the wider community.
We ask people to pre-book parking just because we have a limited amount and we don't want people to turn up and not be able to park because there isn't anywhere else other than our parking barn. But they can come anytime, day or night, any day of the week. And the only time the site is closed is over Christmas and New Year. But apart from that, it's free.
Community engagement is really important, actually, in terms of rewilding and kind of connecting people to the land that they live on or nearby. And very early on in the project, we got a community engagement manager, Julia, who does a fantastic work with local community groups, bringing them to the site, kind of showing them around, having fun little activities around campfires with like marshmallows and stuff. It is absolutely amazing. And then she also works with like local village in terms of kind of communicating what our plans are. We want to be as open as possible about, what we're doing, how it benefits them, how they can, help us and benefit us and stuff. And it is a real kind of dynamic that we try and get there, that we want to be as open as possible and kind of getting as many people to the site as possible.
As we walked around the site, I was struck that after only 18 months, it already looked pretty wild. Jan told us more about the history of the site and how it might have looked hundreds of years ago.
Where we are physically is at the heart of what used to be the Forest of Selwood, which was like New Forest or Epping Forest or Sherwood Forest, a massive hunting forest. But the king sold it off in the 14th century and it's pretty much been taken down. There are some remnants in various places, but we know it was wood pasture. So it was a mosaic of habitats then and likely before that. So single trees and woodland, copses, scrubby areas, boggy areas, marshland, open grassland, which was species rich. And that was its likely heritage. The Forest of Selwood, the word Selwood means sallow wood, which means the forest of the willow wood. So the willow, and there's one just behind us, should be everywhere. It isn't. And that's one of the things that has ways in which the land has been changed by it being managed for hundreds of years by people. What many people listening to this podcast will be aware of is conservation, and that is where humans put themselves at the centre of everything that's done. And the presumption is that humans know what's needed and that they do the sorts of things that helps the landscape take a certain direction. So conservation will be restoring a habitat for a particular bird, for example. Rewilding is very different in many ways. There is some crossover. It's a process of going forwards led by nature. So we are not dictating. We have ideas of, and increasingly evidence of natural processes which are not working as they should. And that's where we would decide, Dan and I would talk about what we might do to restore those natural processes. But we are not creating a past. We are experimenting and seeing where nature will lead us into the future.
Despite some similarities to other rewilding projects, Heal has a unique approach to funding, which they're hoping will allow them to reach their goal of a site in every English county.
So the model, put briefly, is that affordable debt can finance a project like this, and then you repay it as fast as you can by getting donations from both individuals and from companies. And so we have three ways of getting people to help us fund our land. We have a Heal 3x3 scheme, which is a 3 metre by 3 metre square of land with each one with a What 3 Words address. And people can sponsor that for a year or for their lifetime. And if you're a company, you can sponsor squares in the name of your employees. That's called an employee square scheme. And then the third way is sponsor an acre. So we have an area of the site which is closed to the public, but if you're a company and you sponsor an acre, we can take you to that area and give you special access. And so those are the three ways, and all three contribute to us gradually sort of paying off the funding.
You're listening to the Carbon Copy podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe to hear the next ones as soon as they land. And do also consider leaving us a review to help others find amazing stories like this one. Now, back to our walkabout in rural Somerset. We're walking over some pretty uneven ground. Although there is a path mown through, the grasses and other plants grow up high on either side. The ground is wet, but not boggy, despite Jan mentioning how wet the summer has been.
The water flow on the land has been altered significantly. One of the things that we've had is a hydrologist, Peter Stone, come and look at the natural water flows. And one of the projects we're looking at is restoring the natural flow of water on the land. And when it does rain, we couldn't be here. We would be up to our thighs in water. Wow. Not for long, but it rises very quickly and drops very quickly.
Little key spot on our detour on the usual trek. This is our first beaver dam that we found on our site, which is pretty immaculate, really. I was just out wandering the river. I think I was doing some acoustic monitoring, and I heard there was a little trickle of water here, and for some odd reason I just thought, you know, I don't normally hear water trickling here, so I had a little look through the hazel, and sure enough there's a whole load of twigs and stuff piled up. Most of the twigs are actually kind of pointing downstream, and they kind of layer them on top of each other, and then you've got the mud that they kind of use their little pawy hands to kind of push into the front of the dam then, and that kind of holds back your water. So there's a real clear difference in the water height of a good few inches now between upstream and downstream of the dam. We'd been monitoring the beavers. We'd seen their signs, you know, earlier in the year and stuff. We've been camera trapping the whole section of the river, and initially we'd kind of seen the one, you know, doing its own thing. And then we thought we might have been seeing two, because they were going at slightly different times, you know, kind of go past the camera one way and then go past the camera the same way again. And we were like, that's weird. And it was only a couple of weeks ago, actually, that one of the volunteers who does the camera trapping took me aside and showed me some footage. And we finally got two of them together on one screen having a little canoodle. And it was just like the cutest thing ever. It was just gorgeous. We would never have imagined them to be damming this year, you know. So, yeah, it's so exciting because they hold such kind of amazing things that they can do to the land, you know, in terms of the wetlands that they create. You know, we talk about how wet this site is, but we want it wetter because, you know, the ponds and the river and stuff can hold so much life, you know, so it's really, really exciting. What the beavers will do is they'll dam some of it like this. Eventually the sediment builds up, and then, you know, plants will start colonizing, and then more water kind of flows. They build bigger dams, and then that whole process hopefully increases or raises the bed of the river, and then the water itself will reconnect to the floodplain like it should have done.
It was so lovely to hear how excited Dan was about the beavers. I wanted to know more about his journey into this work and about what his role entails day to day.
I did a year's volunteering with the RSPB on one of their sites. That was all very practical habitat management stuff. And then previous to that, I actually did a mathematics degree. So not the usual kind of way into this role with the RSPB. And that was on a very kind of heavily managed site for wildlife, specifically focusing on certain species like lapwing and curlew and stuff. And that kind of got me asking questions like, why can't we just leave the site be and let it re-wet itself and whatever? And they were kind of saying, no, you know, we've got to make sure that we kind of, you know, keep the management going and stuff like this. We don't want to lose these species. And so after that year of volunteering, I then started, you know, looking online on a lot of the websites, like Rewilding Britain's websites, and just trawling through and basically kind of just learning more about rewilding and thinking, oh, this is a thing, you know, it actually is possible. And through that, I then got the traineeship with Heal for a year, which is how I got to work with Heal. And that traineeship was through a scheme called New to Nature, which was run by Groundwork. It was Lottery Heritage Funding, Prince's Trust, I think, as well. And they got about 100 young people into environmental jobs or green jobs. And that kind of ranged from me being outdoors doing rewilding through to people being indoors doing kind of policies and advocacy for nature recovery. My role kind of varies quite a lot depending on what we're doing. I coordinate volunteers and contractors to do surveys, and then I sit behind my desk planning things with Jen. Next year, I'm hoping to get out on the site to kind of start doing stuff on the land to kickstart nature recovery.
I wanted to hear from Jan more about those volunteers that Dan works with, and to understand a bit about how many people were involved with Heal so far.
We were 2 people full-time plus a part-time member of staff until March last year, and then we've now grown to 8, not including me. So I'm a trustee, but we have a team of 8 now. I'm doing all kinds of things from community engagement to land to events. We have a new volunteering platform and the just over 100 people had signed up for that platform, which is very specific. So they're looking for opportunities either from home or here. So there's a big base of people, which is, again, is an amazing thing to have happened so early on.
Yeah, the volunteers are actually quite crucial to this site and any kind of nature conservation or nature recovery project. We've got some quite experienced volunteers doing things like moth trapping and some bird surveying, that sort of thing. And they really kind of fill in the gaps around our paid surveys that the contractors that we get in, ecologists do. And that's really useful. And so like I'm then kind of constantly in communication with the volunteers, talking about where we want to survey, what we want to survey, planning it with them, that kind of thing.
Whilst out walking the site, Dan talked a bit more about some of the interventions the team had planned for the next year or so to help restore the site to a more natural state.
We've been doing baseline surveys since we got the site in December 2022. And this is the last year that we want to do our species surveying. And so when that comes to an end, next year, over the winter, we can start doing some kickstart interventions, we call them. So they're kind of key interventions on the land that will help repair some of the damage that humans have previously done to the site. So one of the things we'll do is plant some willow, because we know there should be lots of willow around. And if we can attract those beavers in, then that's only a good thing. Another thing we'll do is smash up a load of the land drains. So in farmers' fields, they'll have drains that are dug. They're typically clay pipes, aren't they, really, underneath the fields. And they're kind of dug into the fields to drain the water off as quickly as possible so the things can grow better. But we want to smash them up, make the land wetter and kind of renaturalise that water flow across the surface and stuff. So yeah, we're excited to kind of start doing all those interventions. We need to see what the deer browsing pressure's like on the site. We're hopefully going to have a thermal drone survey done, which would be cool.
Deer are large mammals and play an important role in the ecosystem, and to restore the balance to the site, Heal planned to introduce more species alongside them.
We lost a lot of the big herbivores previously, like things that went extinct, like the old wild horses or wild ponies, and the aurochs, which were the wild cattle, and the wild boar, which aren't really around in most of the UK anymore. So our plan is to bring in the Tamworth pigs as proxies for wild boar. We'll bring in traditional breeds cattle, in maybe some longhorns or something like that, to replace those aurochs that we lost, and then maybe some like Exmoor ponies or something to replace those wild ponies. And then because they're not around, they won't obviously colonise naturally. So we'll bring them in very low numbers at the start to see what they do, and then allow them as much as we can to give them a natural life. Unfortunately, our site, the way it's kind of split up, it's only about 460 acres, doesn't allow for complete wildness in terms of those grazing animals, but hopefully we'll kind of limit the management as much as possible.
Even whilst out on our walk, it seemed like both Dan and Jan were coming across things that they hadn't seen before. I wondered how much information they had about the species on the site, and whether anything they'd found had surprised them.
I'd say through the baseline surveys, we're understanding more and more in terms of the species that we've got here and stuff like that, how the water flows across the land. But in general, rewilding always throws up surprises. You know, we've had the beavers turn up and we weren't expecting that so quickly. You know, we've got camera trap footage of, say, like a pine marten that was travelling through. That's quite a surprise. And so there are like little bits and bobs like that. You know, we may end up getting some insects that appear on our radar that we just go, oh, you know, that's not something we'd particularly, you know, expect to see. So rewilding's all about that kind of thrill and what might turn up, you know. So
this is no question an ecologically depleted landscape. However, what has surprised us is just how many species there are here of all sorts: reptiles, birds, insects, mammals, small mammals, but there are very small numbers of each one. So you are seeing these little starter populations, which is the most exciting thing, because if they're here in small numbers and nature creates the right habitats for them, with our help, the populations will go up. So on a specific example of that, we have not done anything to the grasses. Apart from mowing some paths, the grasses have grown long, flopped over. The land really quickly was absolutely peppered with holes. I mean, literally, you would see 50 holes in a small area. And those were voles, mice and shrews. So as soon as your little mammals increase, you see birds of prey. So 2 barn owls, breeding tawny owls, kestrels, now a family, which wasn't here last year. We had short-eared owls this year for the first time. We didn't have them last year. We've just had peregrine falcons the first time, not here last year. Pair of hobbies. It's just extraordinary. So I think the speed of response in some ways has been wonderful. And the fact that there's so much here, even though it's depleted, is really heartening, because if it was literally a desert, I think that would be more challenging. And we are surrounded by a lot of nature-friendly landowners, which makes a difference here, which may not be the case in some other places. So we're blessed.
It's great to hear that the landowners nearby have been supportive. I wanted to know what other people locally thought about the project and what the reception had been.
Like anything, some people love it. The majority are either mildly supportive or uncertain, and there are a few people that believe that all land should be kept for food production. But we see that the only way for nature to recover is for it to have more room, more space dedicated to it. It can't just be the edges of farmland, and that's critical. But dedicated spaces that are new are fundamental to nature's recovery. And what we have to remember is England, out of 240 countries and territories in the world, England is in 234th place, where one is best. So the state of nature in England is absolutely on the floor. So this can't happen soon enough.
Jan and her team have big ambitions for Heal. I asked what the plans were for the next couple of years in terms of growing the organisation.
The most important thing in terms of where we're headed is to prove the concept of the model here. So this is the blueprint site for every site to follow. All the things we learn here, we will carry on to the other sites. We'd expected to look for our second site by now, but actually we must make sure everything is understood, settled, and then we've got our natural capital income starting to flow, which we expect to happen with biodiversity net gain. And then we'll be ready to have site 2. And we think that sites after that will then accelerate in number. But you just must do things well to begin with, and then speed up when you feel you're ready. You've done all of the things that show that this model is workable, and then you can go on and do your subsequent sites.
It's definitely been a little bit slow at times, I'd say. You know, when you're kind of just surveying a site and you've got to do a lot of the planning for the future, you've kind of got to wait to see what the site does. But as much as it's a little bit slow, it's also very exciting because you're doing your surveys and you don't know what appears, you know, so you're kind of constantly getting hits of dopamine as you're going along. I think another big challenge is very hard to know whether you're doing something right. Your big kind of part of rewilding is that a lot of people say you make your mistakes, you learn from them. No one really knows exactly what nature wants to do. It's impossible to predict. And so that kind of realization, you've got to just kind of step back and go, don't worry about it. You know, nature will take its course. You know, that can be a little bit kind of worrying at times. But yeah, we're all in this together, and nature will show us what it wants to do.
I love this idea of allowing nature to guide the project. It is, I suppose, the true meaning of rewilding, allowing nature to regain what has been lost and to truly heal. There's an incredible community of people and projects that are working in this space, many of them connected with the team here. I wanted to finish the episode with some thoughts from both Jan and Dan about the importance of this network of organisations that have helped get Heal Somerset to where it is today.
The list is so long of people who helped us, because it goes back into the research period before Heal was launched, which was at least 2 years. So the NEP team have been really helpful. Wild Glen Hill have been really helpful. Chris Jones at the Beaver Project in Cornwall has been really helpful, thinking about beavers. Beaver Trust. Rewilding Britain, though, probably above everybody else. They've made us a pilot site for their monitoring framework, and the government have been helpful because they gave us a grant. The Grange Project, they've been great as well. And there may be people listening who think they've missed me out, so there are a lot of lovely people. Everybody is so generous with their time, and the challenge when you are in the maelstrom of establishing your first site is that other people would then like to learn from us, and enabling that time, which is one of the reasons we love doing this, because we know it reaches people. And we would like to do all we can to help more of this sort of thing happen. The rewilding community is generous, kind, and it's just been an incredibly positive experience. And though I've never worked harder, I've literally never had so much joy from the way I spend my time. I won't say Monday to Friday because it was often a weekend.
I'm a cog in this bigger piece that is protecting nature, protecting wildlife, protecting the environment, you know, and it's not just about our little site of 460 acres here. You know, we're part of a bigger movement across the nation to halt the biodiversity decline, hopefully try and solve issues within the climate crisis. And then also, touching on community and well-being, there's a real crisis at the moment in kind of how people are feeling and the connection between them and nature. And I think being a part of that and doing something that's kind of so physical around us, and getting people here and doing stuff, it's immense, really. And it's like every day you kind of come to work and you put a big smile on your face because it's like things are happening, and it's just amazing.
You've been listening to the Carbon Copy podcast. This episode was written and presented by me, Isabel Sparrow. Our producer and editor is Bradley Ingham. Thanks so much to Jan and Dan for their time, and to Ruby for helping us arrange all the recording. If you'd like to find out more about Heal or about any of the other organisations mentioned in the episode, please check out the show notes. And if you know someone who'd find this interesting, do share the pod with them. Thanks for listening. Until next time.